All right. Well, I know we're all missing Lynn Helm, so I searched high and low for a Ole and Lena joke that might relate to the election, and I did find one. And it turns out that Lena, it was election day, and Lena was working very hard to get Ole to motivated to get out and vote. And Ole was complaining the whole time, leaving his comfortable chair. They got outside, it was too hot. She turned on the air conditioning. 5 minutes later, it was too cold. And Ole's just complaining and complaining and complaining. He's saying, Lena, why did they close down that polling place? Now we got to drive all the way into town to do this. He said, I don't like it. They get there, there's a long line, and Ole's just in a bad mood. And Lena says to him, Ole, you know, if you don't vote, you can't complain later. Well, he said, oh, I guess you're right. But Lena thought about that, what she just said, and she said, Ole, you know what? It's okay for you to sit in the car. I'll go vote. And that's how I'd like to start this, though. If you don't vote, you don't have the right to complain later. So make sure you vote so you can keep complaining and criticizing and critiquing our government. All right, so we'll get into the statewide races, some legislative races to watch, and then I'll be ending up with the ballot measures. And I know many of you are stick your nose to the news, and you've got pieces of this. I hope to bring it all together and show you where I think it's going to go. Now, Jeff said, don't just stand up there and tell us how this might be go this way or that way, but you don't know. He said, put yourself on the line. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to make some predictions, and we'll see how well they turn out. All right, so let's start with our political environment here. Governor Doug Burgum is retiring, looking to move on to other things, and so that certainly opens up the field for new leadership, and that's what we have in the governor's office. And then in our legislature, Republicans control all federal and statewide offices in our state right now. Senate Majority Leader David Hogue is overseeing a 43 to 4 supermajority in the North Dakota Senate. And House Majority Leader Mike LaFleur is leading an 82 to 12 supermajority in the North Dakota House of Representatives. We went through a bruising primary on the Republican side with multiple Republican incumbents facing challengers from within the party. And then we enter this election season with some polling data from just last week. The polling data I'm using is a North Dakota News Co-op poll that came out on October 2nd. And that had the presidential race with Donald Trump at 59%, Kamala Harris at 32%, and 8% undecided. And I think that sets the stage for what we'll see in some of these other races as well. Moving on to the U.S. Senate race, Kevin Cramer has been our senator since 2019. Before that, he was our congressman. And he's been supportive of energy independence and ag subsidies and opposed federal government regulations, to mention some highlights. And he's been a strong advocate for North Dakota's oil and gas industry. He's being challenged by Katrina Christensen. She's an engineer and professor, and she's campaigning. A lot of her themes have been centered around rural health care, sustainability, and education. Cramer in the poll leads at 51%. To 29% for Katrina Christensen and 20% undecided. So Cramer holds a strong lead in this race, and I'm going to predict that the race goes to Kevin Cramer. Is that good, Jeff? Am I doing it right so far? Okay. All right, the federal race, the U.S. House. So Kelly Armstrong's running for governor, so that means while he's still serving as our congressman and finishing his term, he'll be vacating, and that left his seat open. Republicans ultimately settled in the primary in a 5-way race on Julie Fedorchak. She's been on the Public Service Commission since 2012, appointed by Governor Dalrymple, and then ran for the office. And she's focused on energy infrastructure and rural development. Her campaign emphasizes her regulatory experience. And then she's being challenged in that race by Trygve Hammer, Democrat, U.S. Army veteran, and Hammer's been advocating for environmental sustainability and more on health care. The polling data shows Julie Fedorchak at 53%, so just 2 ahead of Kevin, and then Hammer at 28%, and just a little less undecided in this race, but not much. So I'll predict Julie Fedorchak wins that one. In the statewide races, Kelly Armstrong, our current congressman, former state senator, lawyer with a background in the oil industry. His platform includes energy independence and fiscal conservatism, running against Merle Pepcorn, who's a sitting state senator now, former radio broadcaster, Pepcorn has been talking about rural infrastructure, healthcare, and education. And then there's a third candidate in the race, Michael Coachman, U.S. Air Force veteran advocating for small government and personal liberty, running as an independent. And in this race, Armstrong's at 54%, Pepcorn at 24%, Coachman brings in 3%, and 18% undecided. So I'm going to call this one for Kelly Armstrong. Now we get in the other statewide offices, and the polling doesn't exist on these that I'm aware of, at least publicly. We have the auditor's race. Josh Gallion is the incumbent. Has been focused on transparency in government spending. He's being challenged by Timothy Lamb, who's been advocating for more frequent audits and government accountability. I'm going to say the Republicans have momentum based on the polling in the upper races, and I'll give it to Josh Gallion. Treasurer Thomas Beadle is the incumbent. He's running unopposed, emphasizing fiscal responsibility and state investment transparency. And then the superintendent of public instruction race, which is not a partisan race. Kirsten Baszler is the incumbent, and she's running against Jason Heitkamp. Heitkamp is a well-known name, but Jason Heitkamp is not a Democrat. He's a Republican, and so is Kirsten Baszler, even though they don't carry those labels on the ballot. But I'm going to give this to Kirsten as the incumbent, and she's working to modernize education, expand career training. Heitkamp has been focused on the idea of cost-efficient rural schools. And then Randy Chrisman, who's in the audience today, is the incumbent in the Public Service Commissioner race, and he's being challenged by Tracy Wilkie. Randy, thank you for your focus on energy infrastructure in this state. I know your opponent's been advocating a little more on the clean energy side of things and stronger public utility oversight. I think you guys do a great job, so thank you, and I'm going to give this to Randy. Is that okay, Randy? All right. All right. And then our insurance commissioner, John Gottfried, the tallest elected official, I think, in the United States, if not the world, is the incumbent, known for healthcare, consumer protection, and he's running unopposed too. So I'm going to say clean sweep for Republicans at the federal and the statewide offices. Now, legislative races to watch. I'm just picking a few here to really zero in on. The first one I want to highlight is Legislative District 9. This is the one that the legislature decided to split into A and B districts, just like District 4 out west. There's two districts that are like that. So the Senate is at large for the entire district, but the House members are split into A and B districts. And this is a court-ordered district. The court shaped this district based on that lawsuit. And so this district has two tribes, Turtle Mountain and Spirit Lake, in it. And that gives it a whole new shape. Now, Judy Essenson's a sitting senator there, but I don't really give her the incumbent power because of the dramatic change in the way this district looks. And this is a contest between her and Richard Marcellet, who's been in the Senate before and is from the Turtle Mountain tribe. That having been said, the Republicans here are both enrolled members of the two respective tribes. One of them is Turtle Mountain, the other Spirit Lake. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. Typically, you would say that our reservations tend to vote Democrat, and we've seen that from time to time, but here we have two enrolled members of the tribe running on the House side. But I'm going to stick with history with regard to the way our tribes have gone and say with a district that's made up of two tribes, I'm going to lean toward this one being a Democrat result, and maybe a Democrat's clean sweep. Could be wrong. I don't know how to evaluate the dynamic, but Jeff said I have to make predictions, so that's my prediction. In Fargo, I picked District 10 as one to watch. Here in the Senate, we have incumbent Ryan Braunberger, and then we have George Roughhead challenging him on the Republican side. And in the House, Hamida DeCain is a Democrat incumbent, and Steve Swantek is the Republican incumbent. So you see that this district was already split. Two Democrats and one Republican have been serving the district as incumbents. And then we have Jared Hendricks running for the House. So just three running for the House. But this is one to watch. Both sides are working very hard. All candidates there are working very hard. But it's one of those districts with where Republicans have an uphill climb, I think. Republican like Steve Swantek was able to punch through last time, but with split results on the ballot. And I'm going to I think I'm going to give the edge here to Braunberger as an incumbent and DeCane and Swantek as the incumbents. I'm just going to stick with the incumbents in this district, and that's my prediction. In Grand Forks, I'll go on to the next numbered district here, 18. Scott Myers, the incumbent, being challenged by Kyle Thorson, and Steve Vetter's the incumbent. But we have a three-way race there for the House, and the prediction I'm going to make here is that Scott Meyer prevails. I think he's well-known and well-liked in that area. And I'll give the incumbent power to Steve Vetter. But this is also a district that has shown in its history to flip either way. So I'm going to hedge my bets here and say that one of those Democrats punches through in this district. But I could be wrong. But Jeff said I had to make predictions. All right, Valley City. Here we see the state Senate race. This is one to watch as well. Mike Wobama is the incumbent, and Knut Jovig is the Democrat. In the House, we have one incumbent there, Dwight Kiefert, but he is not running with Daniel Johnston, so there's a split in that district between Republicans. I was just down there and driving around in the Fort Ransom area, and honestly, I saw more Democrat signs than I did Republican signs. So I know the Democrats are working very hard, especially in the outer rural area, kind of south of Valley City as you get down toward Lisbon and Fort Ransom. I'll give the power of incumbency to Mike and to Dwight. And Daniel Johnston has been elected there before. I think the others are less familiar names. So I'm going to suggest that this one is a Republican clean sweep, but not without some possibility of some of these seats flipping to Democrats. And then next, I'm going to take us back up to Grand Forks in District 42. Claire Corey is running for the Senate. She was in the House. Now she's running for the Senate. So she's an incumbent name, but not running as an incumbent for this office. She's being up against Rodney John Gigstead, the Democrat. And then really what needs to be watched here is the House of Representatives race. Emily O'Brien is the incumbent. She's not paired up with Doug Osowski. They're running independent campaigns from each other, so their yard signs aren't together. The Democrats are putting a lot of effort into this district. So I'm going to give the Senate race to Claire, and but I think it's quite possible that the Democrats pick up the House seat. So I'm hedging my bets on this one here. And I think Emily might be in a little bit of trouble, but she's working hard. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. And then back to Fargo as the last legislative district to watch. This is one that I think the Democrats are all in on. This is one that they hope to punch through and run the tables for. State Senate, it's an open seat. Jess Arneson and Michelle Powers are running there. In the House, Jim Casper is the incumbent. Desiree Morton is the Republican. Todd Reisenhauer and Will Thompson, Democrats. I'm going to suggest that this one here has mixed results. I think it's likely that the state Senate is a pickup for the Democrats. And Jim Casper's been in trouble before, but the guy is Teflon, and so I'm going to give him the power of incumbency and say he probably punches through yet one more time. But I'm not sure he can bring his running mate along in that, and I think either Todd or Will have a really solid chance of punching through. So I'm going to predict mixed results here. All right, Jeff, I made all my predictions on every race, so should be happy. All right, let's clean up with the ballot measures then. We have 5 ballot measures on the ballot this cycle. And the first is constitutional measure number 1, updating terminology in our Constitution. This focuses on Article 9. It changes outdated terms like school for the deaf and dumb to school for the deaf and hard of hearing, and replaces state hospital for the insane with state hospital for the care of individuals with mental illness. So it doesn't affect the operation of these institutions at all. Fiscal impact is none. The polling data shows 75% in favor, 9% opposed, and 16 undecided. So this one, non-controversial, makes sense. I think people are going to see that on the ballot. I think it prevails. Again, the first 3 measures I talk about were ones put on our ballot by our state legislature. So these first 3 have all debated in the Senate and the House first before they've been submitted to us for ratification in our Constitution. Next measure is constitutional measure 2. This does several things. First, it implements a single subject rule for ballot initiatives to reduce voter confusion. We've seen ballots with multiple topics that are unrelated in the past. There are other states that have single subject requirements in them for the constitutional amendments, so we're mirroring some of that, at least with that component of this measure. The other thing it does is increases the signature requirement for constitutional amendments, not statutory amendments, but constitutional amendments only, from 4% of our population to 5% of the state population. And then it requires any constitutional amendment to be voted upon in 2 election cycles, both our primary election and at our general election. If we were to pass this, that's how future constitutional amendments would have to track. Fiscal impact on this is none. Right now, the polling data says that 38% support the measure, 28% oppose, and 34% remain undecided. And so you can see here that right now, favorability has a 10-point lead, but there's 34% undecided. So if you vote yes on this measure, you're voting to tightening the process for citizen-initiated measures and to make it harder to amend our state constitution. If you vote no, then you're opposed to those changes and want to keep the current process in place. I think it's a very good chance that the undecideds break in favor of no on this and may overcome that 10% deficit, even if they vote. So I'm going to predict this one has a good chance of failing, but probably not by much. But that's where I'm going to lean, just because I think the tendency is undecideds to vote no on these, and that we're not close enough for the win. All right, in Constitutional Measure 3, the final one that the legislature put on our ballot, this has to do with legacy fund. The first thing to know about this is that when the legacy fund was voted upon by our voters to sock away a significant amount of the oil and gas revenue, no one really thought that it was ever going to reach $11 billion. And so at the time, the legislature with supermajorities was allowed to spend 15% of the principal. To my knowledge, we've never done that. The legislators are out here. I don't think you've ever done that. What's that? Never spend any of the principal. So in practice, none of the principal's ever been spent. And so this would reduce that 15% down to 5%. Now, just do the math quick. 5% of 11 billion is still a pretty significant figure. But the challenge the legislature has had with this, as my understanding, is that that 15% reserve has to be liquid. It can't be invested as aggressively as the other 85. And so if you're voting in favor of this, it's because you would like that other 10%, taking that 15 down to 5, to be invested a little more aggressively and not have to be held in reserve because the legislature might call upon it to be spent. And so that's what this does. It locks up a little more of the principle of the legacy fund. It also establishes a legacy earnings fund for the fund's earnings, which can then be appropriated for state use. They have been using those earnings now, but preserves more of the principle for long-term financial stability. The fiscal impact would simply be the additional earnings that could be potentially generated by reducing this amount that has to be held in reserve. So 40% of voters are undecided on this, with 33% supporting and 20% opposing. I'm going to go with those undecideds probably break largely in the no. I think a good chance this one fails when it gets to the ballot box. So, Jeff, that's going to be my prediction, but I could be wrong. Okay, that leads us into the final 2 measures, which were put on the ballot by the initiated measure process. First is one that we've all heard about. It's the one that's getting all the attention, and that's initiated Constitutional Measure 4, prohibiting property taxes based on property values, or ad valorem property tax. So its purpose, I've boiled down to 3 bullets here. Prohibits local governments from levying taxes on the assessed value of property, except for bonded indebtedness. Requires the state to find alternative revenue to offset what's been estimated to be $3.15 billion in biennial property tax revenue. And it limits the debt political subdivisions can incur, with some exceptions for voter-approved increases. The fiscal impact is that $3.15 billion figure you see there. 40% are opposed, 28% in favor, and 33% undecided. Many voters are concerned about eliminating property tax without a clear alternative, is what we see in the polling data based on some of the other questions. So a yes vote on this is supporting property taxes based, prohibiting property taxes based on assessed value and requiring the state to find an alternative funding, and a no vote says let's keep the present system in place and look to the legislature to make reforms. 40% are opposed to the measure, and if the remaining undecideds, even if they break overwhelmingly, I think this one, again, if you don't understand it, you tend to vote no. And so I'm going to say this one leans towards being defeated on the ballot. I think that opposed will go up, and I think it'll get to above 50. That's my prediction. Finally, we have statutory measure number 5, and that's the initiated measure on recreational marijuana. It legalizes the use, possession, use, and sale of recreational marijuana for adults age 21 and over, allows possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana and the cultivation of up to 6 plants for personal use, establishes a regulated system for cannabis industry, including production, processing, and retail sales, and imposes taxes on cannabis sales with potential revenue directed toward health care, education, and other public programs, etc. And finally, provides some legal protections for employers regarding employee marijuana use and imposes penalties for violations of the law. The estimated revenue on this that I've seen is $10.2 million, but the expenses are 8.3. So there's not a lot of room in there for a margin of revenue increase for the state. Additional costs may come in forms of behavioral health and public safety that could well push that 8.3 even higher. Support is divided on this. 45% are in favor, 40% are opposed, and 15% are undecided. The outcome will likely depend on how the undecided voters lean. And the one thing I want to mention about this poll, it's the one critique I have of the poll data that I've been showing, is that it tended to gear toward youth a little heavier than a lot of other polls, and youth don't vote in the same percentages. And if they don't vote in the same percentage, then the youth vote part of this goes down a little bit, which would drop, I think the youth are more in favor of this than older adults. So we may see that favorability drop a little bit down in the polls. But that having been said, I think this one probably passes this time. That 45% is not too steep a hill to climb, but there is a solid opposition that's gotten going on this too. But I think it's going to be a close vote. So if you vote yes on this, you're supporting legalizing recreational marijuana and creating a regulated market. And if you vote no, you're opposed to legalization and keeping recreational marijuana illegal under state law. All right. So that's the political environment. That puts it all together for you in terms of what you'll see on the ballot. You can already vote by mail and absentee ballot. Early voting begins in a number of jurisdictions. And don't listen to Lena. Get out and vote so that you have the right to complain later. Thank you for your time today. I'd be happy to address any questions if there's time, but otherwise I'll stick around. You can catch my arm as well. So.